let's build an agent that makes $20,000 a day. So I shared a minimalist plan that I made for members of our private program in this video over here about 9 days ago. And the whole goal of this was to get to 10K a day without complexity and with a bias towards simplicity. And the great news is that it has already happened for one of the brands that we developed this plan for. As you can see here, since the beginning of March, when we implemented it and made the recommendation, you can see spend started going up around here. And also sales on this side started going up. And the beautiful thing is on the 14th of March, which was last Friday, we hit first $11,500 day, which took just about 11 days to hit, which I'm really happy about. And we have another brand, so that's brand number one, another brand that is moving in the right direction, where in January, you can see average of about 500 a day. And most recently on the past Saturday, there was a peak of 2.6K. So I'm building an agent for brands, members, and clients to scale up to 20K a day, since a handful of them inside of our program have peak seasons coming up in spring and summer. And we really want to make the most of these moments. So as usual, the plan for today is first, we are going to talk about how the agent helps with scaling and what role it plays, what function it's actually going to serve in your marketing system. Then we will do a game plan of the build, and then we're actually going to build it live together. So you can see me run into challenges, troubleshoot, and do it in real time. Let's get into how this agent helps with scaling to 20K a day, which isn't a stretch given that this brand is already hitting 11.5K a day. And this one's at 2.6 and starting to get some of that traction. So 20K a day is not a stretch. And there's two ways that I like to go about it when it comes to approaching it with simplicity. Number one is the most obvious, which is spend more on what's working. And so this agent does not help with this, but this is one of the ways to just scale up. And you'd be surprised at how often it is where I will look at an ad account and find ads and ad landing page combinations that are just being throttled. Not intentionally, but because there's a lot going on in the ad account and there's a level of complexity in there where the stuff that is doing well is just getting hidden. So number one is to just spend more on what's already working. Number two is to take what's working and we scale it out. What I mean by that can kind of be explained with, let's say, looking at music, because recently I've been on this bit of a kick where I've been listening to a lot of acoustic versions of pop songs. So you have the original song that is popular. Let's say like a Drake song or a Justin Bieber song or a Kendrick Lamar song or a Taylor Swift song. I think of things as scaling it out in different directions where, let's say it's a Justin Bieber song and it's a pop song, right? We could do remix of it where it still stays in the pop category, but we've remixed it to pop. And then we can also make more meaningful changes where it is remixed to, let's say, classical or instrumental, or let's say rap and rock, and lastly R&B, right? So let's say there was a version of Sorry, right, by Justin Bieber, and then all of these different versions were created of it, either by him or by fans. So that's one way of scaling things out. But another way that I think about scaling it out is taking the fundamentals of what was done in the song of Sorry, whether it's the lyrics or whether it's a composition of the instruments that were involved, and then we make another song that doesn't use the same lyrics, but borrows from what was doing well. And maybe like the new version of that is called Apology in another song or something, right? Or something like My Bad, right? Where we're taking the concept and we're scaling it out in a more meaningfully different way, where I'd say these are more iterative and these over here are more net new. A brand who I think has done this well, just bringing back from the level of abstraction of the metaphor with music to actual e-commerce, is they have had a headline that has been working well for them over the last 2 years that they haven't been able to beat, which was show your man he's worth every second. And they've been able to express that in a lot of different ways, both iteratively and also through net new expressions of it. In the way that I'm defining net new, which is not taking the first ad that they did from 2 years ago and just tweaking the background colors over and over again, but rather finding different ways to show that same phrase being expressed. So you can see here, they have one that says, show your man he's worth every second, with a gift as unique and storied as he is. And then over here, we can see another version where show your man he's worth every second at the top. And then they're doing a repetition of he's worth it 3 times. So they've done a very good job of not leaving opportunity on the table and really scaling a concept that has worked well and making the most out of it. The way I like to think about it, as far as what they've done, is if you were at a casino and you showed up at a slot machine and you pulled on this lever and you won. And at this hypothetical casino, this is a casino where if you find machines that work, it's not uncommon for them to continue giving you money. You would just pull this lever over and over again. And that's what Original Green has done a good job of doing. And that's also what this agent is meant to help you with, which is when you find something that is working, it helps you find lots of different ways to scale out the thread of what's working. In the case of Original Grain, the concept and the metaphor, because they sell watches, is show your man he's worth every second. And they've been able to ride that for a very long time. And that is a simple way that you can go from doing, for example, 11,500 on a day to 20K a day during your peak moments. It's simply being at the casino and not walking away from this slot machine. It's sort of like a slot machine where it might have to be moved in a different way every time to get the output that you want, which is a winning lineup of the pictures to have a payout. But you know that the machine is a winner. And so you keep finding ways to pull that lever. So tactically, how do we do it? Well, I covered it in the last video here that we did 9 days ago. So we talked about the 2 frameworks we have, which is the stress-free scaling flywheel that goes from leverage, optimize, expand, and innovate. And then with that, on the innovate step, we have our framework for net new stuff, which is contrast, cross-pollinate, challenge, and clash. And this agent that we're going to build is going to actually use the frameworks that are here in front of us. So the net new framework and also the leverage iteration framework to help you with coming up with tactics and ideas for when you find a winning ad that is working or a winning concept that is working and finding different ways of expressing that. So that if currently, let's say you're doing $1,000 a day it might take you to 5. Or if you're doing 11.5, it might take you to 20. So that covers the first step, which is talking about how this agent helps with scaling to 20K a day. Now we can get into game planning and building the agent live. So that wraps up the plan. We have done coverage of scaling. All right, so let's dig into the game plan for the build. And the way I like to approach builds is kind of like with cooking. So I like to think about the ingredients that I'm going to need before I even start getting building. I think in cooking, they call this mise en place, which is basically everything in its place. So what are we going to need? Well, we're going to need something to input into the agent and output. So that's going to be Slack, since that's where a lot of communication happens already for a lot of teams. Then we'll also need an AI agent node who's going to help us with running the show. And let's clarify here, we need a Slack input, a Slack output. We will need to connect this agent through a RAG system to have context into the brand so we can iterate on ideas with it when it gives us ideas that we want to refine together. So we'll do that through a Google Doc node. And then the agent is going to need to be able to call a workflow that can do the heavy lifting of analyzing the ads that we give it, breaking it down, and then coming up with ideas for us. So let's call that the Subworkflow. So what does that entail? I am thinking it's going to entail and include a node for analyzing the image, which we'll use OpenAI for that. And then that'll pass it over to an agent. And this agent can be responsible for analysis. And then we can have another agent that is responsible for actually coming up with the ideas. And just for clarity, this one over here is purely responsible for breaking down what it is that it's seeing. So I'll call it the vision helper. This way, as we keep it simple and we have one responsibility for each node, we're able to track and troubleshoot where the issues lie if we're not getting the outputs that we want. So the flow will end up being this all gets passed down, this final agent has the final input, and this will get fed back into, or returned rather, to the primary workflows agent. And this agent is what's going to bring the output back to the user. So there's our mise en place for building this simple agent. And one last thing that I think is worth mentioning is these agents down here. I'm thinking we can have a RAG system also with Google Docs that give them the resources they need to be good at their jobs when it comes to coming up with ideas. Because what we can have is Google Docs that are dedicated to one of them, net new ideas, and then one of them dedicated to iterative ideas, because we have a playbook for each of these categories of ideation. And I'm starting to think this agent right now might actually be redundant, and we could probably just do with these two nodes and keep it pretty simple. So we'll start with that, and then we'll see if we need this extra node here, because I have a feeling that we might not. We can just keep it simple with ingesting the ad and then coming up with ideas on the ad that we know is winning. All right, zooming back out, there is a game plan. So let's jump in n8n and start doing some building. And so as a bit of a recap before we jump into doing the build, just one more second, what I want to do is just recap what it is that we're doing macro. So what we're doing is we see an ad performing well in our ad account. Step 2 is we take the ad and we input it to the agent. Step 3, the agent gives us ideas on how we can scale what's working. So pretty simple 3-step process that allows us to not leave any opportunity on the table. All right, let's get into it. All right, cool. We are in n8n. And so what I've done here is I have pulled up a few tabs. I've pulled up one tab, which is a new canvas for the top level agent. And then I've also pulled up another tab for the Subworkflow agent that we're going to call. And then I pulled up a previous workflow that we used for a landing page agent. And the reason why I want to do that is because, as we like to do, or rather not do, we don't like to start from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy over some of these nodes that I think we can repurpose. So I'm going to grab this over, well, I'll start with Slack. So I'll pull this one over, paste it in, and pull this one, paste it in. So now we have the input and the output. I'm going to pull over this agent as well, and we can replace a bunch of stuff inside. So with Slack, I'm going to open this guy up. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to swap the channel ID for my actual channel ID. So I can do that by hopping over to Slack and looking for the channel ID, which is over here. Copy that back in n8n, paste it in. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here for the output. Pop in the channel ID and save. And we got the Slack stuff set up. So now let's play around with the agent. We're going to need to change the system prompt, and we may need to change the expression here depending on what happens. All right, cool. Let's hook up a brain to it. So what we'll do is we'll use OpenAI for simplicity, but you can swap this out if you'd like. Just going to go with one of our pre-set up credentials, which we will be doing a video on credentials and integrations coming up, which will walk you through step by step on how to do that. But in this case, we're going to use one that is already set up. And let's just find 4.0. I'm going to just actually type it out just to find a little quicker. All right, and let's use this one over here. Let's also do a window buffer memory for the context window. So this node here helps with context, keeping context in the chat that you're having. So I'll just throw in context window just to make that super clear, and we will save. And the last thing we'll do, or the next thing rather, is I want to grab this Google Doc node, which, by the way, if you want to set this up, it's super easy. I am copy and pasting stuff, but it's as easy as starting from scratch. So I just go here, go Google Docs, and it'd be the same thing. I just like to save a few steps. So I am going to kill this one off, pull this one in. And as far as brand playbook goes, this is the same one that we can use for now for the purpose of our current use case. So what I'm going to do is drag over these connectors so that the information can be passed through. And let's just do a test, because usually things don't pan out the way that we expect for them to. And running into the roadblocks actually allows us to fix some of the things that are wrong. So I am going to do a test workflow. I'm going to pull up Slack and I'm going to say, hey, and let's see if anything comes through. All right, it's not going off right now. So let's just check and make sure we are using the correct channel ID. So let me stop this, save. Let's just double check there. So Slack is ending 8T. Let's do this, 8TE, yep. And just check the output, 8TE, yep. So let me just do a save here. Let's try it again, because normally that should do the job. Hey, and it's not going through, and I think I have a clue as to why, and that's likely because our credentials probably need to be updated. All right, let's try one of the previous credentials we have and see if it'll work. Slack account, right here again, Slack account. Gonna save that, test workflow, try it again. Hey, so was able to make it work. Just had an issue with the webhook that we had here. So fix that up, and basically over here when Slack, I'll just run it again. Test workflow, say, hey, and we should see it come through. So good, it came through, and now it's just stuck at the context window, which is fine, with an error in the context window because that is fixable. So what we'll do is go to context window, and we will just adjust the session key that we are using. So what I'm going to do is change this from connected chat trigger node and change this to define below. And what we'll use instead is this over here. We will use json.user, throw this in as an expression and see how that goes green. That's a good sign. We'll save and we can try this again. So we'll do a test workflow, hey, and see if it comes through. Cool, so it went through. Now we just need to troubleshoot the output. And that's just because there is no expression in this current workflow where there's any outputs containing this expression. So I'm just gonna kill this off, and I will pull through the output from the AI agent node. Let me just zoom in a little bit, the AI agent node. So I'm gonna pull this in, and then we'll do it one more time. Test workflow, Slack, go, hey. Now we should have a nice response come through. Hi again, how can I help you today? So we got the basics, which is getting our foundational nodes in. So we have Slack trigger or the input. We have Slack response for the output. We have the agent in the middle. We have brain, and then we've got the context window. And also we've got the brand playbook to call when we need to use it, which for the message of, hey, we don't. And so I'm happy that the agent knew not to call this tool because there was no need to. Cool. So those are the basics. Now let's also add in one more tool, which is the workflow tool. So I'm just going to copy this over from our previous flow that we did for the landing page agent. And if I were to do this from scratch, what I would just do is call n8n workflow tool, but I don't feel like starting from complete scratch. So I'm going to pull this one over and let's connect it, and let's rename this. We can rename it to is winning ad analyzer, because we're going to be inputting a winning ad, and then it's going to be spitting out, after doing an analysis, ideas for us that we can use to scale. We can just make some adjustments here, call this tool to analyze. Instead of a landing page, we can say user sends you. The input should be a URL of an image. That'll be accurate. And the output should be a string from the tool. So I'm pretty happy with that. And let's also just change which workflow it is. So from list, we can just change it to 20K. We have the sub workflow that we have in this tab that's empty at this time, but we will populate that after building this top level workflow. Go here, save. And so now we have this workflow for it to call as a tool. All right, and now we have probably the most important part of the agent, and that is the prompt. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure this is on expression, and it is because I'm using the base of another agent from this landing page workflow. But by default, it's set to fixed. I always use expression. So I'm just going to pop this open, and I'm going to rework this prompt so that it's more contextual or the use case that we're after. So let's take a look at this. You are a helpful, intelligent, we'll change this from landing page expert to ad creative strategist. Your job is to collaborate with the user on modeling landing pages from brands they send you the landing pages of. So let's just change this instead to, let's say, on generating new ideas using the best performing ads they submit to you as the foundation. And let's add in a little bit more context. The user will submit to you ad creatives that are working well for their brand. The user would like to receive back iterative ideas and net new ideas that come out of analyzing why the submitted ad is performing well. You will have access to tools. So tool number 1, we can change this to winning ad analyzer, and we can adjust some of the nuances around this tool. So it says call this tool when the user includes a URL to a landing page they would like to model for their brand. So we can change this up to call this tool when the user includes a URL to change this up an ad they would like to get new ideas on. And this part here, you should output a URL as a string to the workflow and in return receive a JSON output that you can return to the user through Slack. That's all right. Next thing is a brand playbook. So this all looks pretty good as it is. Call this tool when you need context on the user's brand or business. It contains business specific information about the user's company and customers. This is a helpful tool to call when the user would like to refine, we'll say ad ideas together with you. Moving on to instructions. So if the user sends you a message that contains a URL of an ad they would like to use as a foundation to create iterative and net new ideas from, call the winning analyzer tool. The user would like to refine ad ideas that you have outputted. Call the brand playbook tool to familiarize yourself with the brand. And this one we don't need because all the ideas are just going to be simple, I'm thinking. And if the formatting doesn't look so good, we can always use another node instead of a prompt over here to touch up the styling that the agent outputs into Slack, because sometimes what the agent will do is output a whole bunch of markdown, and then in doing so, Slack ends up looking like full of hashtags and star symbols that make the output look kind of hard to read. But we'll see if we need this. For now, I just took out that last line. Let's keep reading. Important, when you receive outputs from tool, and we can swap this out, winning ad analyzer tool, you must output the content as is to the user. Do not summarize or reformat the output in any way. And I'm happy with that because that has been an issue in past agent builds where this top level agent will summarize and shorten what it gets from another workflow when it spits back the output to the Slack node, which is not what we want. We actually want all the ideas that the Subworkflow is analyzing and then creating and sending back to us. Alrighty, so looks like we have our base set up here. And what I'm gonna do is just another quick A message just to see if everything passed through. So let's watch. Still all greens, so we are okay. All right, cool. So the parent, or rather the top level workflow, is set up now. And of course, we're gonna have to test it out when we want to test the output all the way through when calling the workflow. But for now, it's in a good spot for us to hop over to this other workflow that we are going to be calling as a tool. So let's start getting this one built out. So as a first step, what we can do is call execute Subworkflow when executed by another workflow. And so we'll use define using fields below. We can add this and we'll say the name is URL and the type will be a string. And that's because URLs are strings in that they contain both numbers and characters. So nothing fancy there. And to my understanding, string just means that. Numbers, characters. All right. And part of our game plan was to have a node for analyzing the image that we submit to the agent. So my go-to at this time has been using OpenAI, the analyze image function. So we'll do that, and we will use one of these pre-set up credentials. Resource, we have it as image. Operation, analyze image, model, we'll have to choose one. We'll just use 4.0 this time. Right now it says what's in this image. I think we can do better than that. So let's work on this prompt over here, right? And let's start with our basic one, which is you are a helpful, intelligent, we'll call it description specialist. We'll say you will be given an image ad that is performing well for the user. Just scroll in a little bit, zoom in a little bit. User who operates an e-commerce business and advertises on Facebook. Your job is to describe exactly what you see in much detail as possible, including imagery, copy, headlines, sections, locations of elements. That's just to cover our bases on what it needs to describe to then pass over to the next agent, which will do the analysis and the ideation. You must describe every minor and major detail with extreme clarity, with a level of redundancy that feels unnecessary to most people. And why I'm saying this is because I want it to almost feel like it has to go to the extreme of over describing what it's seeing, because the next node over isn't actually going to see the image. It's only this node that's going to see the image. So we need it to do a really good job of describing exactly what's in there. And one of the reasons why, instead of doing it all in one node, is because I want to have a tool, right? I want to have an AI agent node next to this one that is able to call the tools of our playbook on coming up with iterative ideas and our playbook for new ideas. And right now at this time within n8n, this node here that allows you to analyze the image doesn't actually allow for tool calling. So that's why we can't really do it all in one as one node. We have to sort of separate them out into two steps. So let's come back to the prompt and continue finishing this up. So what else do we need in here to make it perform really well? Well, I'm thinking we can say the rest of our marketing process depends on the accuracy of your description. You must describe the image inclusive of copy you see verbatim. Do not summarize copy, because that's an issue that I've seen happen with previous agents we've built. It's important for others on the team to see the exact components of the image being used for the ad, right? So this feels pretty workable at this time. And one of the things that I like to do when it comes to prompts is just try not to use too many words, just because I've seen some content and research that mentions, I think there's a certain token number that is most ideal for performance. So it's not necessarily the more you have in there, the better. Next node we're going to need is an agent node. So I'm actually going to just go back to the parent, and I'm going to copy this over just to use as a base. And I'm going to kill off some of these nodes because I don't need them. So we don't need Slack because Slack is not needed at this level. We don't need the brand playbook because we're going under the assumption right now that when it's going through this workflow, it's iterating on ideas specific to that brand. So it doesn't really need additional information. So I'm going to kill this off, or I'll deactivate it for now. Doesn't need to be used. Doesn't need to call another workflow, but it does need a context window in it. Or it doesn't need a context window actually. So I'll kill this off too. But it does need a model. So we'll just use OpenAI again on 4.0. We'll bring this over, tidy up. And then what we can do is play around with the prompt that is here, because it's not going to be the same prompt since this is from the parent workflow, or rather the top level workflow. Actually, before we do that, let's just put some placeholder nodes for some other Google Docs. So I'm going to duplicate this Google Doc one and duplicate this other one. So we have two. And what I'm going to do is call this one our net new playbook and rename this And then we'll put a description of call this tool to review the net new ideas playbook. And I can actually do this here too, net new ideas playbook. And then I'll pull in the doc ID in a little bit for that. So this one we can activate and we can pull in. And these in is like doing surgery as far as doing the connectors to the agent. We'll connect this as well. And we can activate this because I actually do want this active. And we will call this one the iterative ideas playbook. And we can do this here. Save. Oh, so we have these here. And actually, I'm going to jump to grabbing these doc IDs and throwing these in here. So then we can wrap up on the Google Doc nodes. And then we'll work on the system prompt for the agent. So I pulled up the docs for our playbooks on iterative ideation. I'm just going to scroll in here so you can see it a little easier. And it's pretty robust. Worked on it together with AI. It's 5 pages long and it's got 100 ideas for iterative changes that you can make. So I'm just going to pull in the doc ID, which is just the stuff that is between these slashes. So this one's the iteration playbook. So I'm going to hop over here and back to the iterative ideas playbook, pop that in there. And then on the net new one, again, similarly, we have a playbook for this. So it's going to refer to the playbook that we have for coming up with net new ideas using the foundation ad as a reference point and coming up with ideas that are non-iterative, but use the fundamental core element of what's working in the winning ad to scale the concept out. So we'll do the same thing here. We will pull over the doc ID of the Google Doc and pop that in here. So these two are now set up as a resource for the agent. And now we just need to modify the prompt so that it's contextual to where it's sitting in this whole system. Cool. So I'm just going to actually clear this out just so that it's a little cleaner and we'll get to typing. So a helpful, intelligent ad creative strategist be given a description of an image ad that is performing well for the user operating an e-commerce business that is advertising on Facebook. So very similar to the first prompt that we had. Your task is to review the input and come up with 5 iterative ideas and 5 new ideas to take what is working well in the ad that you have been described and scale to new ads. We'll say new ad ideas. Your output should be very clear descriptions of, and we can give some examples of, or rather descriptions of what it should be outputting. So we'll say what it needs to do. 5 iterative ad ideas that can be easily implemented in an iterative fashion to the existing image ad. And we just make this bullet points. 5 net new non-iterative ad ideas that run with the core reason why the current winning image ad is profitable and winning. You have access to 2 tools to complete your task. Tool 1, our iteration playbook, which contains our team's tactical playbook of iterative moves we can make whenever we find a winning image ad. Looking pretty good. Now let's talk about tool number 2. Tool 2, and we can just fix this tool. All right, our net new playbook, which contains our team's tactical playbook of non-iterative net new moves we can make whenever we find a winning image ad. You must call and review these 2 tools before coming up with your ideas to return to the user. And I like to throw this in because number 1, supposedly The LLM does a better job of remembering what's at the bottom of the prompt. But also number two, I want to ensure that it actually calls the two tools so that the ideas that it's giving us is grounded in tactics that we typically like to use. And there might be some adjustments I need to make because naming of the playbooks does not actually match up, which might not be a big problem here, but just to be safe, we can update that. So net new ideas playbook. Let's just see what it says here. Net new ideas. And then I think this was iterative ideas playbook as opposed to iteration playbook. Iterative ideas. All right. So we have the prompt, and then we're probably going to need to play around with the inputs because this is currently not set up properly. This is actually coming from Slack, this expression. So once we pass through and we get some errors coming through, we can fix that up a little bit. What I can actually do instead of running a full test in order to get the inputs that I need is I can actually pull up an image to pin and then run the flow with the Subworkflow. So what I'll do is I will find an ad to use as our test input on the Subworkflow. So what we can do is we can actually set our mock data here. So what I'm going to do is go here, set it to URL, throw in the URL over here, and I'm going to kill all this off that don't need in this comma, and that should work. All right. So let's see. And what we can do is 1, test what the outputs start looking like. 2, make sure everything's actually flowing through. And 3, fix things as things don't flow through because some of these inputs are going to need some working. So in this, we'll do a test step on this node and see if it works going through. Doesn't work. So what's the problem? URL can't be empty, and that's because this is empty over here. So what I'm going to do is on the schema view over here, as opposed to table or JSON, I'm actually going to just pull this over so then I don't have to type anything. And that fills in the expression for us. So I'm going to run this again and it should be going through. Let's take a look. So it's going through. It's doing its thing. Just going to pass that input over to the next node. And I'm just going to pin that to save that so I don't have to keep running it over and over again. And it did what we told it to do. So if you remember, the prompt that we had here is to just describe what it is that's going on in the image. And so at a glance right now, I haven't done a deep dive into it yet. It looks like it's what it's done. So that's running that here. And then why I'm going through this test is actually through this step right here is because I know that this expression isn't going to work because we pulled this from parent node Slack input. But because there's no Slack in this workflow, this expression is not going to be valid. So I just ran this so that I can do what I just did, which is I can pull over this over here from the schema view and pull this in. So now this node and this agent is able to actually have an input to work with. So what we'll need to do as well is we will need to let it know context of what this thing is. So let's give it a little bit of a description. So we can say, here is the description of the ad image. I just want to make sure the words that I use here was you will be given a description of an image ad. So that's contextual. Because basically this is sort of like us messaging ChatGPT along with all of this text. So just save this and then we can do a test step. And that way we can check if all the nodes are working and if it's actually calling these tools while it's doing its job. And then also we can just see what the initial output looks like at a glance. So I'm going to pop this open, do a test step. It is doing its job. That's good. It has called these two tools. It called the iterative ideas playbook. It called the net new ideas playbook. It's now working with the model and now it has an output and looks like, let me just drag this over. It has come up with ideas and it's done it in the way that we asked, which was here's the iterative ideas listed out 1 to 5 and the net new ideas listed out 1 to 5. So, which is exactly what we described over here. Your output should be very clear descriptions of this. So happy to see that it's following that so far. And as far as the quality, other subjective quality of whether I like the ideas or not, I'm not too concerned about just yet, because that can always be refined with what we put inside of these tools over here. But also scroll down a little bit here so you can see, we can always update what resources it's calling. And then also we can always update the prompt that it's being given and refine that over time. So not too concerned. I'm just happy that it process is working. And at a quick glance, I'm liking what I'm seeing because it's not gone too crazy. So we know that independent of the top level workflow, this Subworkflow is working right now functionally. Now we need to make sure and go back here that when we do input an image into Slack, that everything flows through properly, especially when it's calling this tool over here that I'm moving around, which is the Subworkflow that's over here. And that the output of this workflow and this agent is actually making its way back to this agent over here. I'll just use an arrow to this guy over here, so that it can pass it over to Slack and send it back to me inside of Slack. So what we can do is come here and we can do a full test. What I'm going to do is kill off this pin. Otherwise, the data is not going to pass through during the test. So I'm going to remove these pins. I'm going to save this out of good habit. Save this out of good habit as well. And what I'll do is I'll basically just use the same URL again. We can have some fun with this. What I'll do is I'll pull out another ad. We'll also use one from Purdy and Fig over here. And we'll say, here, this one. We'll copy this image address. And just for context, right, let's actually pay attention to what's in this ad. So it's made my house smell like a spa. It's got an orange in it, product. It's lifted a bit, got some shadows to make it look more aesthetic. And it's got a 50% off badge. And so why I want to review this is because I want to make sure that the work that the agents are doing is actually not hallucinations. So let's pop back over. And what we'll do is trigger a test workflow, pop open Slack, pop in the URL, and let's see if it's going to be going through. So it's doing some stuff right now. It got the message, passed it to the agent, passed it to the model, context window was updated. Now the workflow is working, which is great. Workflow passed the information back to the agent. Now it's working again with the model and then coming back through to Slack response. So if we check Slack over here, we should be seeing the output where it's structured in the 5 iterative ideas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 5 net new ideas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's see if it did what I'm expecting. And let's pull this up. So it has done that. Let's just make this full screen and let's see how this is looking. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little easier. And yeah, it showed up in Markdown, which in this case is actually not too bad because of the way that it's really structured. So we know these are headings and then we know this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not gonna bother with changing it from Markdown to another format just to save a little bit of time here. And also because it's not too hard to read this. So it's done what we needed it to do, which was to come up with the ideas and to tell us the ideas. So here's a 5 here, and here's the next 5. And why don't we, in real time here, take a look at the output and let's compare it to the image that we fed it to see if it did a good job when it comes to directionally being where we want it to go, when it comes to giving us iterative ideas that are worth thinking about, and also net new ideas. So idea number 1 over here, test different pastel backgrounds like light green or soft lavender to maintain the spa-like feel when introducing subtle diversity. Such color experimentation can attract different viewer preferences. That's interesting. What I like about this is it's not saying to test colors for the sake of testing colors. It's saying to test colors because of the concept of the spa. So I like that because I know one of the I'd say criticisms of iterative testing is that sometimes it can almost seem like it's just coming up with iterations for the sake of iterations. But in this case over here, it's actually trying to build upon the core idea, which is the spa. So I'm happy with it. All right, next one is shift the orange and the bottle's positions, possibly placing the orange fruit in front of the bottle. This could create a sense of depth and keep the viewers engaged by varying the composition. Next up, text and font placement. Experiment with a handwritten style font or a serif typeface for the quote, and try placing the text at the bottom of the image or alongside the product to see if it influences engagement differently. I kind of like that because I have seen image ads that have done well where the headline is not really a headline. It's like a bottom line, but it's technically the headline because it's the only text that's on the image. So I like that, playing around with the positioning. Incorporate customer rating, number 4. Add a subtle customer rating badge below the 50% off sticker using light beige or blue so it integrates seamlessly while adding social proof. Like it, not against it. And then number 5, subtle animation. If allowed by the platform, animate the orange slice on the bottle label with a slight slow spin. This subtle movement could draw attention without detracting from the minimalist aesthetic. So I'd say I'm pretty happy with these. I'm not strongly opposed to either of these. I don't see any huge hallucinations. So I like them. Could they be more meaningfully different yet still iterative? I think so. But that's something that we can adjust over time with the iteration playbook and also the prompt. And also every single time you run the agent, it's going to give you different outputs, which for our purposes is good because we're trying to be divergent in our thinking in order to find lots of new ideas. We don't want to be super deterministic for this use case. Let's take a look at the net new ideas just to see if there's any hallucinations and also to just do a quick subjective feel of the performance of this agent. So as far as net new ideas go, contrast principle. I like that it actually read the playbook because it's following the 4 C's that we like to use of contrast, cross-pollinate, challenge, and clash, which we talked about in the minimalist playbook video. So contrast principle, monochrome element, develop an ad where everything but the orange fruit is in monochrome, emphasizing the freshness and natural appeal of the citrus theme. The fruit pops, drawing immediate focus. That's pretty cool. I'd say this is still in the realm of iterative, but I still like the idea. And it is using contrast. It's just not using contrast in I'd say a meaningfully different way where, let's say, this was being expressed in a totally different way. Next up is cross-pollinate. So create an ad that blends your product with an actual spa environment image. I like that because that's not just changing colors now. That's not just changing to monochrome. That is actually bringing to life the spa concept, which if I was coming up with ideas for this, is what I would imagine to be the thing that is appealing about this ad. So I like this one in the way that it's being meaningfully different, yet still drawing upon the foundation of why this ad may be working. So create an ad that blends your product with an actual spa environment image. Show the bottle amidst a spa setting with towels and candles, which communicates the spa-like benefit vividly. Next one, challenge principle. Spot the difference. Design an interactive ad that shows 2 similar images side by side with a minor alteration, such as a slight shift in the fruit's position, inviting viewers to find the change with a rewarding discount upon click-through. I don't like this one as much because to me, I have a bias towards what challenge means. And for me, challenge in the way that we meant for it to be in the playbook is to actually be challenging beliefs, not necessarily challenging people interactively. So not as happy with this one, but again, that can just be updated inside of the playbook, which I'll bring up over here. So in the n8n playbook, under challenge, we can actually be a little bit more explicit about what challenge actually means, and that we have a bias towards wanting it to be about challenging the persona or the consumer's beliefs. So that can all be updated here in the challenge section. So what I probably do actually is just kill this off, because we do have the challenging beliefs one, challenging the status quo. So I wouldn't do it right now, but I would consider potentially getting rid of this. All right, let's hop back to Chrome and Slack. Last one we have of the very first test of this agent is humor and absurdity. Sorry, number 4, actually, clash principle. Old versus new concept. Develop a narrative in a carousel or video ad, contrasting a cluttered home atmosphere with your bottle on a messy countertop on one card and a serene, clean space on the next card, with your product at the center, showcasing the transformation. All right, not necessarily a bad idea, but I'd say the execution of what we intend for when it comes to clash doesn't exactly get hit here. For us, clash really means to smash together two things that you don't expect. So I'd say it did try to clash here, but not clash in the way that we wanted to. So again, what I would do similarly to what I just did is I would come over to this playbook here and I'd make the updates here in the clash section to outline more clearly what it is we mean by clash and to stay within the boundaries of what we mean. But the idea that it gave is not a bad idea to consider. So let's just hop back over to the agent, and it looks like everything is going to plan. We didn't need that extra node in between over here because we got away with just having the descriptor function of this OpenAI analyze an image node, and then the agent over here to come up with the ideas for us. And the ideas have been, I'm happy with them as a starting point. And when we look at the top level agent over here, looks like everything is flowing through pretty nicely. So there's both the build and also a run through of what it's like to input and output with the agent. That wraps up the plan. We have done our coverage on where this agent fits in. We have done the game planning and the build. And I'd say the last thing that I want to just touch on is next versions. So the next most obvious version for me is going to be a video version of this, where it comes up with ideas for you on the video side. And another version of this that I'm thinking is one where we do a similar build to this one, but along with the ad ideas, it does a mock-up for you of each of them. And I've done versions of this in the past before where it does generate the concepts in image form for you. The challenge with that though is that it takes a long time to run, and there is an additional cost on the API calls to generative AI models. So the trade-off might not be there, but we'll see. But right now I'm pretty happy with it as it is, because a really good idea can be worth a lot of profit. So the fact that we can get pretty much virtually unlimited ideas from this agent and in the time frame that it takes is just awesome, because instead of me or anyone else having to spend a full afternoon's time worth of brainstorming on how we can scale out a winning concept, we can get literally 500 times the ideas in a matter of minutes by just adjusting the number of ideas that we want this agent to give us, or by running it over and over again, each time with different outputs. So if you like this, what I'd suggest is you take a look down in the description, because every day I send our list and newsletter a new insight that can help with growing your profits through the use of different strategies and stuff like this with agents. And that's also where you'll get the opportunity to get an invite to join our private program. So hop on below, and that's where we can chat, and I'll see you in the next one.